I invited Dr. Darren Beattie back on the podcast. We talked, just a few days ago about that bombshell Revolver news article that put a new possibility forward that the FBI was involved through operatives or through informants in orchestrating January 5th. And now there's another, I think, very interesting article in Revolver just a day or two ago, making the case that the FBI has a track record of doing this. Of course, in the original Revolver, it was shown that the FBI was very active in the so-called Governor Whitmer kidnapping and assassination plot. There were 5 out of 14 people arrested were connected in some way with the FBI. So the FBI was kind of stoking this up, if not coming up with it in the first place. Hey, Darren, welcome to the program. Thanks for coming on. You point out that the FBI, going back many years, has been in the business of cooking up plots, actively aiding and abetting them, and then busting them and claiming the credit for plots that they appear to have engineered. Is that a fair summary of what your latest article shows?
Yes, indeed. And as I mentioned last time I came on and talking about kind of prepping the audience for this admittedly disturbing thesis that the FBI or other elements of the government could have been involved in 1/6, is to say that, look, this is nothing new. We don't need to go back to J. Edgar Hoover. In that case, I think the most persuasive and really remarkable antecedent was the Michigan case, as you mentioned. But given that that's already part of the conversation, really people do find that shocking. And so if any of your listeners, if anyone's been under a rock and hasn't read the original Revolver.news piece, I highly recommend reading it and sharing it and getting up to speed on this really profound development in our understanding what may have happened in 1/6. And so this newer piece that you mentioned, its exact title is They've Done This Before, 5 Past Cases of FBI Incitement. And it goes through some examples, some of which I find remarkable, like the first World Trade Center bombing, which a lot of people simply don't know. And these cases are interesting in their own right, but they're also very important to reinforce this new narrative about 1/6. And it underscores something that I think is especially difficult, but also very important about the kind of work that Revolver does, is that there's one kind of journalism that's just kind of opinion journalism, and that's important. There's investigative journalism that reinforces or deepens already present and understood narratives. But I think we're in a different category and more difficult and even more important category, and that is investigative journalism that shapes narratives. That is to say that this whole idea that 1/6 could have been something from the FBI or from the government, just the idea that that's the sort of thing that our government does and that's where our attention should be in uncovering what's going on, that is very new and very disturbing to a lot of people. And so it's not quite like something that, we already know, say, I don't know, Joe Biden is bad. So like we uncover something about Joe Biden that's bad that might be a bombshell, but it doesn't require that kind of reconfiguration of one's kind of neural and conceptual circuitry to digest that. Whereas I think in this case, it does require some of that, especially as I pointed out, as a matter of our political psychology as people on the right. I think there's one reason that the left has in some ways been better in a narrower sense at covering this type of story. And that is because the left is animated by a political psychology of wanting to attack unjust institutions of power. In my view, they don't really do that. In my view, the left ends up serving unjust institution of power. But my point is, according to their self-conception, they need to think of themselves as attacking unjust institutions of power. Whereas those of us on the right, I think we're much more oriented toward wanting to defend and even venerate just and well-functioning institutions of authority. So it's more difficult on our side to really get up to speed on this new reality that we face in what used to be in America, what I now call the globalist American empire, that so many of the institutions in this country, in fact, maybe all, including those national security institutions that we're inclined to venerate, have become corrupted. And not only have they become corrupted, they become weaponized against us. And so it requires much more heavy lifting in terms of rhetoric and in terms of concept and in terms of the underlying psychology to reorient ourselves in a manner that we're able to address this new reality.
Yeah, that's a very important statement. And I think what you're saying is that we as conservatives are very rarely in kind of attack mode. We're in defense mode. And we need this kind of critical journalism that looks hard at what institutions actually do. Let's just talk about a single example here, and then in the next segment, we'll dive more into this. Let's talk about the World Trade Center bombing. Yes. Let's talk about this Egyptian immigrant named Imad Salem, who was evidently part of this bombing, but he was an FBI plant and an FBI informant. What did he actually do?
Right. No, I mean, this is quite amazing. And so, again, with the World Trade Center, it's always, a difficult issue because 9/11 has basically eclipsed everything in terms of our kind of emotional investments and so forth. And so a lot of us forget that there was this first bombing, which at the time was an extremely serious event. It was one of the most serious, if not the most serious, terrorist attacks that we had had in a while. And what's even less well known than, just thinking about that first bombing is that this bomb that nearly murdered tens of thousands was built with the help of an FBI informant. That's this Egyptian that you mentioned, Imad Salem. And he was part of this guy, Ramzi Yousef's cell during the plotting of the attack. He was posing as an ex-Green Beret. He was encouraged by the FBI to join this extremist cell. He penetrated the cell, and instead of thwarting the attack, at least in Michigan, they thwarted the attack. In this case, they went ahead, and the FBI deliberately let him go forward. And if you read the Revolver.news article, you'll see interview just tape recordings with Salem basically saying, yeah, we made the bomb and they just didn't stop it. We just went forward with it. The FBI didn't do anything to stop it, even though their informant played an instrumental role in creating the bomb.
When we come back, we're going to dive into a couple of other cases very similar in which the FBI isn't just infiltrating a plot and thwarting it, but rather is pushing it forward, is actually making it happen. This is what you get when you have thugs with badges. We'll be right back.